tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So the word faith is an interesting one in Buddhism, and it's an imperfect translation of the word sada, which means to place the heart. And often we will almost clinically try to translate it as its most acceptable synonym in the English language, which is confidence. Just a degree of confidence in these teachings, in this path. And yet it can become much more in people. It can grow into something that feels like genuine love. And I feel like that is what you touch when you recollect these great teachers. There's monastics who, when they recollected Longpo Cha, would just, tears would be rolling down their face in the middle of meditation. And it's important to touch that part of our heart that loves. People can look at monastics and wonder if we've given up love. But for me, the most pure love I've ever felt was towards these teachers who I just felt a luminosity of spirit and selflessness with. My parents are great too. But there is a place also for understanding sada as confidence, because we had one monk who, his father was not happy about him becoming a monastic and said, look, I just don't like organized religion. And Longpo Siripanyo said, it's okay, there's nothing organized about Thai Buddhism. It's very organic. It's a beautiful ecosystem, but it's very organic. I say that with utter love for that system, and it's the one I grew up in. But the other problematic term there is religion, because Buddhism does not fit into what we have thought of as religion in the West for so long. I have great love for the Abrahamic faiths, and they have great praxis in them, and yet a large portion of the texts in those doctrines are systems of belief. And often they'll rest on a binary of belief. Either you accept someone as your savior or you do not. I think this is embodied in them being referred to as the great faiths. But Buddhism is perhaps better classed as an education system. If you look through the Pali Canon, the words of the Buddha, the vast majority, there are belief structures, but the vast majority of his words are praxis. How do you train your mind to see clearly, to give up grasping, to become selfless? And many of you will know the discourse where he's sitting in the sal grove and says, monks, what is more, the leaves in my hand, and he picks up a handful of leaves, or the leaves in this forest? And I think they're feeling pretty sure about this one. So they say, Lord, the leaves in your hand are few, the leaves in the forest are many. And he says, even so, what I have experienced through direct knowledge is like the leaves in this entire forest, but what I teach is just this one thing. And then he says two things: suffering and the end of suffering. But they are kind of one thing: suffering and the end of suffering. This is what the Buddha gave us. And it's beautiful because this handful of leaves, there's such restraint in this being what he handed us through the ages, where there is great depth and breadth to these teachings, and there are elements of cosmology and more. But the handful of leaves he passed to us was so focused on how we bring the heart to peace and stop hurting ourselves and others. And so the measure of faith that he asks of us was that of a working hypothesis. Can we trust these words enough to try? To try meditating every day, to try giving up unwholesome action and see what happens. And as far as you want to take that experiment is up to you. But there's a gentleness in that. You're not asked to believe something wholeheartedly right off the bat, but rather, if you have inspiration and trust enough to practice, then this path will lead you to direct knowledge. And yet, in that handful of leaves are things that we traditionally don't think of when we try to classify Buddhism as a psychology or as a philosophy, which have all been terms brought to the fore in the scramble the West has had to find a way to classify this body of teachings. The Buddha does teach about unseen realms. He talks about rebirth. He talks about angels. And yet, in Buddhist thought, the conditions we come into contact with every day are dictated by the law of conditionality, various conditions shifting, interacting, giving rise to the vortex of change that we encounter through the sense world and in our own internal experience. And this is a chaotic system, and one feature mathematically of chaotic systems is what's called scale invariance, where a pattern that plays out on a small level will often play out on various scales of size and breadth. And this is beautiful because what it means is the teachings on the states of birth, on the different realms, on all this, we can really approach them, if we wish, as similes for the mind, as ways of touching and understanding the levels of refinement or lack of in our own hearts. And for my last talk, I spoke about the Anapanasati Sutta, a very detailed, analytical ladder towards calm. But there's a whole nother strata of language that touches the Jungian substrate of the psyche through mythology, image, and it's really fun. The Buddha said it was true, but it's also really fun. Ways of looking at our experience. So those of you who know internal family systems, we have a way more colorful internal family system in Buddhism, filled with devas and demons and all sorts of things. And it's very useful to look at the mind in this way. Just as if we don't perhaps believe in rebirth, but we can see how every moment we're born into a new identity, into a new mode of becoming. Even so, we take a look at the vista of human experience and just experience the Buddha laid out. In the Sihananda Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 12, he says, the dark realms, the hell realms, the niraya, are a pit of coals. The animal realm is a cesspit. The ghost realm, the realm of hungry pretas, is like a barren tree scorched by sun, such that a person dying of thirst would find some small measure of shade. A human rebirth is a lush tree where one could rest and find shade. And the heavenly rebirths are divine mansions, cool. And nibbana, for this person wandering, dying of thirst, is a cool pond, an oasis where one can drink one's fill and rest. And so to note there that all the other realms are just respites. These are all impermanent and shifting states of being or of mind. And the only end place where one finally drinks, where one finally finds satiation, is nibbana, awakening. There's a commentarial story at the end of the Buddha's journey towards enlightenment, where Mara, sort of the Buddhist embodiment of defilement, confronts the Buddha, and he has his hordes with him, and all the divine beings lament the Buddha will never achieve the apex of becoming anymore when confronted with this adversary. And then the Buddha just touches the ground and calls it to witness, and we realize that the Buddha was never aiming at the apex of becoming. This path aims towards a much more humble and yet transcendent goal of being with reality, truly, and touching something beyond what we know of as conditioned reality. So the lowest realms are the niraya, and these are the hell realms. Joseph Goldstein we spoke to, and he said, I was giving these workshops with these other teachers, and everyone was giving ones on metta, and I just decided to give one of the hell realms, and more people signed up for it than any other. And I thought that was great. But the Buddha does speak about these. And to be fair, much of this color that you'll see is actually from the commentaries. Isn't the Buddha's words. Much of it is, but much of it is not. And yet there is wisdom even in that, just as you would kind of suss out the wisdom hidden in mythology. So just to say, as I go through all this, if it sounds particularly strange, there may be a chance it wasn't actually the Buddha saying this, but it's worth touching because it's really colorful and fun and interesting. And relevant. It's part of the handful of leaves. And the hell realms, as you would expect, are realms of burning, of frigid cold, of deep suffering. And the Christians talk about it as beings curled in on themselves, stuffed together as tight as mustard seeds in a jar. So the sense of being curled in on oneself and at the same time completely claustrophobically crushed. And it's relevant at the end of the cycle of dependent origination, which leads to suffering. The Buddha says, this leads to birth, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And many of you will know the quote from Longpa Punadhamma, which I referenced, where he says, that's so unfair. People say, you Buddhists, all you talk about is suffering. And we say, no, we also talk about sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. But notice, after a time, when this word despair no longer applies to you, there will come a point on your practice where that word no longer applies. Things are still brutal, difficult, but when you've stopped grabbing hold so strongly of a changing world looking for a solid, of something which is burning, stopped believing in the narrative of the external realm so much and find a different refuge internally, then when things inevitably shift and disintegrate, your heart doesn't break with them. And notice this as a gift from the Buddha. You can often miss it, but notice if that word has stopped applying as much. And it's not an easy path there. We have a story of Ajahn Achalo in his first 5 years as a monk, just becoming so distraught and running up to Ajahn Anan, my teacher, and saying, when will it be any better? And Ajahn Anan said, in 5 years, it'll be a little bit better. But this path is also extremely fast. It's as if we've usually measured our life on an XY axis of success and failure, and suddenly this path has us move through a Z axis. Everything shifts, and things can look very similar on the outside. But notice how the white-knuckled grip has softened and your hand has begun to open. This is a gift from the Buddha, from this path, the lack of despair. I think very few of us gnash our teeth very often these days, and that's definitely something you encounter in the biblical verses. The next realm up is that of the animals. We think of this as such a delightful realm, but animals are afraid and live in fear constantly, unless you're born in a middle-class household as a dog. There's a Buddhist joke that dogs are set to be reborn as humans next lifetime, so they're really excited. Cats have just been reborn as humans, so they're like, nah, not that interested. But I've also heard it said that if you are very generous but keep bad virtue, you'll be reborn as a dog in an American household. I thought that was quite interesting. But to know that the animal realm is particularly, it's said to be conditioned by scheming for food. Notice that. Notice when you binge or consume in that way, where you really feel yourself kind of tapping into the animal mind state of craving. Lust has the same feeling. Joseph Goldstein talks about asking a teacher of his about lust. And the teacher spoke for about 15 minutes, and then it's in a different language, in Burmese, I think. And then the translator turned to Joseph and said, he says that lust cracks the brain, to summarize. And just to note this myopic view and fixation, and to know that is you tapping into the animal mind state, and to take a step back from that. You can have compassion for those sides of you. Ajahn Sumedho often talks about looking at your different mind states as different breeds of dog. We have our Labradors, our kind of frightened Chihuahuas in the corner. But you don't want to feed that karma. So when you find yourself moving into that space, can you restrain, slow down? One of our teachers said that the sign of a life well lived spiritually is that when you're with others in a monastery or anywhere, you act as if you're alone. And when you're with alone, you act as if you're with others. You have to hold that correctly, but I think you get my gist. The next realm is that of the pretas. Who's heard of the hungry ghosts? Yes. So the Buddha spoke about a state in between, where one is still attached enough to this body or something, obsession, where one becomes a hungry ghost. And the classic image many of you will have heard for these are beings with teeny pinprick mouths and gigantic bellies that can never be filled. And there is this aspect of craving. But I think of it more as fixation. The mind that is depressed, where we're so comfortable with a kind of gray closet that we've become accustomed to, that we can rattle around in it and find some measure of comfort. This is a hungry ghost mind state. And to know, one great story I tell about the hungry ghosts is, pretty sure this is just apocryphal, but I really like it, is some monastics traveling through Thailand, and they find an abandoned house to sleep in. And they sleep with all their heads lined up, but all their feet are kind of, because they're different heights, out of order. And there's a hungry ghost in the house, or a ghost, and it gets disturbed by this, and so it spends the evening kind of ordering their feet, pushing them so that all their feet are in order. But then it sees that all their heads are out of order now, so it goes around and pushes all their heads in order. And then it goes back around, and all night, I don't know if the monks woke up from this, although I have had a monk talk about having a ghost pull on his feet when he was sleeping, so who knows. But this obsessive mind state that goes around and around, this is the preta mind state. And there's a very interesting piece of wisdom hidden in the pretas. There's a story of a generous husband married to a stingy wife, and they both die. And the generous husband's reborn as a tree deva, a tree spirit. And the wife is reborn as a hungry ghost. And every day she comes shivering, covered in rags, asking for clothing from him. And every day he tries to feed her and give her clothing, but it turns to red-hot metal when it touches her skin. And then one day a monastic comes and sits under the tree. And the tree deva, he gives a gift to the bhikkhu and dedicates the goodness of that gift to his wife. And she suddenly finds herself with clothing and food sated. And holding this comparison with humility, because I haven't had someone in my life overcome with addiction. But when we have those people in our lives who are stuck in a hungry ghost state, and that difficult line between enabling and helping, and how sometimes what we give can turn into something that burns even more because it feeds right into the craving. But what does it mean in those situations to see if you can kind of instead dedicate merit, do something good, invite someone along to do something wholesome, and see if that's kind of an oblique way to touch the goodness and invoke it in their hearts. This is the dedication of merit. How you interact with a hungry ghost is you don't spread metta. That can attract them, or at least the commentaries say this. I think it might be fine. I'm not sure. I don't know. But there's a slightly different intention with spreading merit, doing good, and just saying, it's okay, let go, move on, spreading brightness. You can do this to people in your lives. Then we have the Titans, the Asuras. And these are the counterparts to the Devas, the gods. And they're known for anger and violence. But they also really like it. I think the Vikings actually thought this was heaven in Valhalla. They made a slight mistake in that one. But it's not completely their fault, because in the commentaries, and I love this piece, the Asuras believe that they're in heaven. The Asuras believe they're in heaven too. And only once every few hundred years or 1,000 years, when this tree blooms in their grove, do they realize that they're actually no longer in heaven, that they've been kicked out of it by the Devas up above, the equivalent of the Olympians. And then the commentaries say the Asuras rush up the sides of this mountain, Mount Sindaru, basically Mount Olympus, like ants, and do battle. But what does it say about the Asura mind state? That it thinks it's right and righteous. How intoxicating is self-righteous anger? And so to know that the seductiveness of self-righteousness is an Asura mind state, and it burns, and it's based in delusion, and it's very convincing. Then we have the human realm, which is where we all reside, and what a lucky realm to be in. You'll remember this is the tree with lush foliage. And it's still very difficult. But we are so blessed. The Buddha compared the likelihood of coming into a human rebirth to a turtle, a blind turtle, some of you know the simile, surfacing once every few thousand years in the middle of an ocean, and the chance that he would put accidentally his head through a ring of wood the size of your forearm is the likelihood of making it to a human rebirth from a lower realm. We had a monk friend draw a comic of a little turtle popping its head up, and there's the ring like 5 feet away, and it's like, darn it. The Buddha said there's 8 inopportune moments, and I've quoted this before. A Buddha arises in the world, but one is reborn in a lower realm, the Niraya, and so one does not hear the teaching or get to practice. This is the first inopportune moment. A Buddha arises in the world, one is reborn in a ghost state, in an animal state, in the realm of long-lived gods, in an outlying country where they have not heard the teaching, and so one does not hear the teaching and does not practice. Or one is reborn in the right place, a Buddha has arisen in the world, but one does not have the faculties to hear or practice the teaching. This is the next inopportune moment. One is reborn at the right time, in the right place, but one has a wrong view and is not interested in the teaching. Or one is reborn at the right time, in the right place, with right view and the right faculties, but a Tathagata has not arisen in the world, and one does not hear the teaching. This is the 8th inopportune moment. The Buddha said there's one opportune moment. A Tathagata has arisen in the world. You were born at the right time, in the right place, with the correct faculties, with right view, and you hear the teaching. This is the one opportune moment. And what a blessing, how rare that we have touched these teachings and have a community we can practice them with. You are a lucky turtle. Do not waste your turtle luck. This is very lucky. The Buddha praised heedfulness, and the word for heedfulness is appamada. It means literally not drunk. Sober, we are sobering up. I've heard it also said that humans have the mind of a god and the body of an animal. And this particular mix of suffering and lucidity is the perfect alchemy for practice. The next level up is the devas, the heavenly beings. And this is where you begin to touch truly bright states, where we can learn a great deal about how our hearts should move and develop as we practice. The devas mean literally radiant ones or playful ones. When the Buddha describes different types of wisdom, he says deep wisdom, laughing wisdom, quick wisdom, profound wisdom. And when the Buddha says to recollect the devas, the angels, he says, think whatever generosity, whatever learning, whatever wisdom, whatever faith, whatever virtue, those devas have, that I also have in me. And you begin to see this, how the people around you shine. And you can almost see when someone no longer has a human mind, it's a deva mind. They say that one who's become a stream enterer, the devas speak of them as if he were themselves, like themselves. And one day as a young monk, I went up to my teacher and I said, Ajahn, I don't know if you have a direct line to the devas, but if you could let them know if they reveal them, if I get to see a deva, I will commit to ordaining for life. Just putting it out there. And he said, look, Nisabho, or look, Krubanathan, he called me Nathan. There's devas all around you. Look around you. I was like, okay, that's a very wise answer, but I was really hoping to actually see a deva. It was a good answer, though. And just to leave a crack for those who, aren't quite sure about this, we did have another monk I knew who'd had a near-death experience, and I think come away with some sensitivities. And we had a branch monastery together, and the Bodhi tree was barren, and had been barren for months. And we walked past after alms round one day, and he said, oh, a deva just came into that tree. I was like, okay, don't know what to say. Okay, good. And then the next day, the tree had just blossomed into flowers, the entire tree. And I was like, okay. So just leave a little crack for who knows. But there's different realms of deva which can reflect the choirs of angels in Christianity or the different refinements of the mind. And the lowest realm is called the Four Great Kings. And one aspect of these devas is they're very close to losing it, to losing this divine kind of feeling. And there's something that is called this dissolution through corruption. And the commentaries give a story. This is commentarial, but it's really fun. Is one deva going along in his chariot, and another deva looks after him and gets angry and says, look at that fool all puffed up with his own importance. And the other deva looks back and sees that the other deva is angry because, the commentaries say, it's very easy to see when people are angry. And he says, what does my merit have to do with you? These are the fruits of my own actions. And if both devas get angry, they both pop and fall down to human rebirth or lower. But if either one of them doesn't get angry, then it saves both. I really like that story. And Ajahn Kovilo and I have a deal where when one of us gets angry, we will sometimes encourage, or we've wanted to encourage the other to take a picture of their face so that we see what it looks like. The Buddha said one condition for beauty is non-anger. Anger makes us ugly. There's realms that move up. There's the Tusita heaven, which is a realm of loving kindness chiefly. And that transcends roles. The role above the Four Great Kings is one of, the realm above the Four Great Kings is one of, there's the Olympians there, and Saka, the king of the gods, which is like Zeus. It's all about roles and different things. But then above that is Tusita. And this is where they say the bodhisattvas live. And it's a place of love. And I find that so meaningful that to truly touch that realm of love, you have to transcend the roles and the conflict and the nexus of ego that is Saka, Zeus, that is a level below. And I often map these realms onto my body, and Tusita heaven lives in that small, delicate place in the heart. And then going even farther up, the Buddha talks about coming to what he calls the Paranimitta Vasavati Devas. And these are the beings that delight in the creations of others. And what these angels have achieved is whatever they want, it immediately manifests in almost a myopic, hallucinogenic cornucopia of experience. And it's so ironic because they've achieved the apex of the sensual realm. Everything they want is there without the slightest bit of effort. And yet what have they been left with except an existence equivalent to a kind of sensual zombie? There's nothing there except constant satiation of fleeting experience. And yet there's other lessons hidden in this realm too. Because when one begins to get calm, and some of you will have seen this, the mind can begin to, as the conceptual structures dissolve, the mind can begin to move into a flow of color and strange images. And for me, this is almost like you're touching this realm. And to know that in that place, there's also an aspect of surrendering. These devas don't put forth strong intention. And she's running along the side of the prison, looking in, and there's a tableau in each window. She sees in some windows people being tortured horribly, in other windows people partying, having a good time, in others a human birth, in others an animal birth. And the prison just keeps going. And she wants to stop, but then she realizes if she stops, then all these people following her will get lost as well, will go back as well. And so she realizes she can't stop. And the moment she commits to that, the prison ends. And she finds herself in, I love this part, a suburban landscape. And she walks up to this doorway of this nice house and knocks. And a nice wife, a nice mother comes out and says, "Oh, you came from that place. Not many people make it here from there. You have to go back now and help others." And I've never known totally what to make of that landscape and that wife or that mother, how we all interact with that. But to know that the Buddha pointed to an oasis at the end of this path that is beyond all becoming. But in the meantime, the mythology can add kind of a real relevant way of relating to these and seeing what state we're in. So good luck, everyone.
หันธรรมยังธรรมคาถาสาธุการังทดามาเซสาธุสาธุสาธุอนุโมทามิ
There's somebody online too with a question. Sandra.
First Sandra online and then please, Christine. Sandra?
Hey, Ajahn. Let me get this.
Hey, Sandra.
right
Good
here.
to see you.
Good to see you. Hi. I have a couple of questions for you, kind of lumped together. So, I rescue animals, help cats in particular. And I meet a lot of cats that are in bad situations that I can't change, that I can't liberate them from. And it's painful. It's painful work, and I take them with me in my mind, but I can't rescue them all. How can I? Two questions. I sometimes, when I see them, think, is this their karma? Their karma that they're in this situation, and that it's beyond me to do anything about. So that's the first question, and then the other is, it's very painful work emotionally that I want to keep doing, but there's so much bitterness and resentment in the rescue world, and I feel myself getting bitter and resentful at times. How is there a way to apply the teachings so that I can bring goodness kind of with me into the rescue world and sustain my efforts?
Thank you, Sandra. Sandra has the particular distinction of being the only person to bring multiple squirrels into our gathering, and it was delightful. So, in terms of the conditions that beings find themselves in, likely karma leads us to those states. But where that gets misused is people thinking, and I don't think this is what you're thinking at all, but, therefore, kind of letting that be a doorway to shut compassion off. And the Buddha acknowledging that in a human rebirth, at least, when one practices, one can cultivate what he called karma of the path, which is the karma of the Noble Eightfold Path. And that whatever karmic conditions you're given, if you approach them with right view and right effort, you can transmute them into the path. And in a sense, it can all become bright karma, in a sense, or be transmuted into that. But with an animal, it's hard because, often they don't have the faculties to practice. So you can acknowledge the state they're in and, take it as a prod to be very careful in your own path now that you have a human rebirth with a chance to practice of using it very well. And the Buddha gave 4 Brahma Viharas, abodes of loving kindness, and added equanimity because you're right, if there is a situation where you can't help them in the traditional ways, then sometimes your one choice is to step back into equanimity and acknowledge that beings, you can't help all beings in every way at every time. Beings are subject to their karma. And our interview with Roshi Joan Halifax really spoke about how she had to learn to center into her feet and hold her center steady in the midst of all the things pulling on her compassion, and that this was her role, part of our role. And I'd say that also applies for operating in the rescue world or in any domain of compassionate action. Is Ajahn Amaro compares it to sharpening a knife. If we're always alone and never interacting, it's like our angle of the blade on the whetstone is far too shallow. It doesn't get any sharper. But if we're really leaning into the world too much, such that we can't maintain a wholesome state of mind, then it's like the angle's too sharp and it'll blunt the blade. You have to find a way of interacting with those realms where you're getting enough refuge practice time alone, where you can approach them genuinely with not having your heart deeply affected, and maintain mindfulness and hold it as practice. And if you're unable to do that, then I really think as a practitioner, it's probably right for you to pull back from that or help in other ways. Often there's skillful other means or other realms you can help with that won't drag at your heart in that way, or different ways of working with animal rescue where you're not touched into those environments in quite the same way. But yeah, Sandra, like for me, there's a distinction between when I know I'm working with something and when some pattern has begun to take up residence in me, and you don't want that. That means you're beginning to feed the pattern rather than letting it play out and dissolve. So did that help, Sandra, at all? I'd say you rescuing squirrels from your backyard is definitely a go, if you can keep that up too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe one more. I'm sorry, I didn't leave much time today.
Thank you for that discussion on the Bhava Chakra. I studied that from a couple of different perspectives, and like Alan Watts, and then my teacher who's like non-dual Shaiva Tantra and another thing. And so I think I just understood this, so tell me if I'm wrong. So the system, the Bhava Chakra is like the 3 poisons, right? Then the realms, and the 12 links of dependent origination. And each one of those is a system within itself, right? So at the smallest, it's the 3 poisons, which is grasping, aversion, ignorance, and then, right? And then Buddha's outside of it. So you pick one of those systems. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, who knows this image that is being referenced here? You'll see it on Tibetan mandalas often. It's like there's Yama, the Lord of Time, or Kala, I believe actually, holding this wheel of 12 links in different realms. And then at the center, there's the 3 defilements which drive it all: greed, hatred, and delusion, represented by a snake, a pig, and something else. I forgot, chicken maybe, rooster, greed, I believe. Yeah, the Buddha gave many different systems for looking at these things, but for me, it's one of the things that really brings forth faith is seeing the coherence and how they overlay, and the teachings are holographic. Each one often will hold the others within it. And then, yeah, the Buddha saying when they depict these images, you'll often see a monk kind of flying over each one. He'll be flying over the hell realms or the heaven. And I've always loved that. Like, no matter what realm we're in, if we look up or touch into mindfulness, there is refuge there. No matter how bad things are, it can be used as part of the path. And we had a community member who there was a lottery at our Unitarian church for a spirit reading. And she was the one person who put in a bid, so she got it. And she went to the spirit reader, and the spirit reader spent like 15 minutes trying to figure out her spirit guide. And after a while, she's like, I give up. Are you Buddhist? And she said, yeah. And the person said, look, most people have like 1 or 2 or 3 spirit guides, but the Buddhists just have Buddha. I really love that. So, yeah. Okay, we do have to wrap up. If people have other questions, we'll have other sessions for more questions, or any Wednesday evening. We have time on Zoom for that.